run. Hear them calling you and me, every son of liberty. Hurry right away, no delay, go today. Make your daddy glad to have had such a lad. Tell your sweetheart not to pine, to be proud.
On April 6th, 1917, the United States entered World War I. By that time, the Germans had almost conquered mainland Europe, and the situation looked desperate for the Allies. With the involvement of the U.S. and its 4 million servicemen, the war ended on November 11th, 1918. By that time, the U.S. had suffered almost 400,000 casualties and had lost almost a generation of young men. These young veterans returned to the United States needing jobs. The newly formed American Legion set a political movement for the compensation of the veterans. The World War Adjusted Compensation Act was set before Congress in 1924, but was vetoed by President Calvin Coolidge, saying,
"Patriotism bought and paid for is not patriotism."
However, Congress passed the bill on May 19, 1924. The bill promised $500 plus $1.25 for every day spent overseas. However, the catch was that the bonus was not to be paid until 21 years later in 1945. A clause was added to the bill promising that the monetary bonus would be given early if the veteran died, giving it the household name of the Tombstone Bonus. On October 29, 1929, the stock market crashed, losing 12% of its value, sending the country spiraling into the Great Depression. The Great Depression would last 10 years and would send unemployment rates up to 25%. A large number of those affected were veterans of World War I, who were desperate for ways to feed their families. In 1932, Walter W. Waters, an unemployed veteran from the medical detachment of the 146th Field Artillery, began to make plans to assemble a march on Washington to demand that the bonus be paid immediately. On March 11, 1932, followed by 300 Portland men under the banner of the Portland Bonus March on Washington, they began their travel by rail and car to Washington, D.C. Thousands of hopeful veterans joined this cause. The march was met with little resistance due to the fact that it was largely peaceful. In late May, the march had arrived in Washington, 20,000 strong and growing day by day. They settled in giant tent cities and in nearby vacant buildings. All veterans were required to register and show proof of service. The highly organized group built streets, sanitation facilities, and held daily parades. Camp leaders worked with Superintendent of the D.C. Police, Pentham D. Glassford, to keep order in the camp. Waters forbade drinking, panhandling, and anti-government or radical talk in all camps. In order to gain further support for his cause, all communists were kicked out of the protest. The bonus marchers were often given a negative spin in the news, and thusly the popular opinion. They were seen as more dirty, non-uniform, unpatriotic beggars that had amassed on the largest breadline in the country. Though they did have a common cause, these veterans defied the popular opinion.
Look, makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No. Take it from me, this is the greatest demonstration of Americanism we've ever had. Pure Americanism.
Uniquely for 1932, also known as the Jim Crow era, black veterans were welcomed into the march and were fully integrated and included in the camps. Noted civil rights activist Roy Wilkins noted that
Jim Crow was absent without leave.
Women and children also accompanied the marchers in large numbers. Under pressure from the now 43,000 marchers on June 15, 1932, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Wright-Patman Bonus Bill in order to move forward the payout of the bonus. On June 17th, the veterans amassed on the steps of the Capitol, awaiting the Senate's approval of the bill. The bill was defeated by an overwhelming vote of 62 to 18. The Senate adjourned and President Hoover left for vacation. Hoping for the government to reconsider their decision, thousands of veterans stayed in the Capitol. On July 28, 1932, Attorney General William D. Mitchell ordered the police to remove the Bonus Army veterans from their camps. Violence erupted when the marchers refused to leave, and the police shot and killed two veterans, William Huckshaw and Eric Carlson. The government responded by ordering Waters to evacuate several Bonus Army camps, to which Waters replied, "When you start defying the federal government, which don't take any consideration of the human element, you're gonna get licked. We can't lick the United States government, but when the United States troops are called to escort me out, I'm going out." On July 30th, 1932, at 4:45 p.m., a force commanded by General Douglas MacArthur and his second-in-command, later President Dwight D. Eisenhower, formed on Pennsylvania Avenue. 6 battle tanks, commanded by Major Patton, and a full cavalry and infantry regiment from Fort Howard, Maryland, had orders to remove the veterans from the camps, but not to go beyond them. MacArthur proclaimed the protesters as
criminals, men with prison records for such crimes as murder, manslaughter, rape, robbery, burglary, blackmail, and assault.
He ordered his men to fix bayonets and charge the veterans. In the ensuing bloodshed, the military used tear gas to force the protesters from their encampments, and then burned them to the ground. The veterans of World War I were once again being subdued with tear gas. When the bloodshed was over, 2 babies were dead of tear gas, and a 7-year-old boy had been bayoneted through the leg. 55 veterans were seriously injured and 35 arrested. Major Eisenhower was very disappointed in the insubordination of General MacArthur. Instead of being punished for his inability to follow orders, MacArthur was praised as a man of the hour by the Hoover administration, who proclaimed,
"A challenge to the authority of the United States government has been met swiftly and firmly."
As news of the incident spread, the unthinkable happened. In movie theaters across America, the United States Army was booed and MacArthur jeered. The veterans expressed their outrage in the poem.
There once was an old Hoover who lived in a shoe. He had so many veterans he didn't know what to do. So he gassed them and tanked them and burned up their beds, then told all the people they were all Reds.
The images of the veterans being removed contributed to the idea of Hoover being a cold and heartless man. The Hoover administration tried to frame the incident as a mob of unruly criminals being justly kicked out of the Capitol. In a report put forth by the police commissioner, William D. Mitchell, he accused the BEF as being the largest aggregation of criminals that had ever assembled in the city at one time. Democratic Party candidate Franklin Roosevelt told an aide that there was no need for a campaign against Hoover, and then commented,
"Why didn't Hoover offer the men coffee and sandwiches instead of turning Doug MacArthur loose? They're probably camping on the roads leading out of Washington. They must be in terrible shape."
Walter faded into obscurity, and the official group was disbanded. However, small amounts of veterans would protest yearly for bonuses. FDR set apart a CCC camp in Florida where World War I veterans could work. However, camp conditions were miserable, and on August 30th, 1935, a hurricane struck the camp and 400 veterans were killed. Writer Ernest Hemingway witnessed the horror in his piece, "Who Killed the Vets?" He stated,
"Whom did they annoy, and to whom was their possible presence a political danger? Who sent them down to the Florida Keys and left them there in the hurricane months? Who is responsible for their deaths?"
Under pressure from the public because of the Florida incident and stories of veterans killing themselves to gain their bonus, the House and Senate passed the Adjusted Compensation Act of 1936 that guaranteed immediate payment of the bonus. It was vetoed by President Roosevelt, but overridden by a vote of 76 to 19 in the Senate. Senator Patman said,
"Today ends a 7-year fight that commenced May 28, 1929.
The boost to local economies was huge, with an influx of $40 million in Washington, D.C. alone. To veterans, it provided much-needed funds, as expressed in the song When I Get My Money.
I had it now when I get my bonus, I ain't gonna throw it away. I'm gonna say it's time to live on, working hard won't pay.
At the end of World War II, a new generation of young men returned home. FDR stated that the veterans of this war
must not be demobilized into an environment of inflation and unemployment to a place on bread lines or on a corner selling apples. We must this time have a plan."
In 1944, the Senate passed the American Legion Omnibus Bill, now commonly known as the GI Bill of Rights. The bill allowed all veterans of the war to receive a college education or receive money to support their businesses. It passed the Senate 50-0, and in the House 387-0. At the same time, General MacArthur was planning the liberation of the Philippines, Eisenhower was liberating Europe, and Patton was invading Germany. For the three, the bonus march would only be an embarrassing incident. The GI Bill provided the compensation for veterans that allowed the country to become a well-educated, well-housed, new American middle class. Because of the stand of the bonus marchers, today's veterans received compensation for opportunities lost due to their service.